this edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast, we sit down with ESPN ACC writer David Hale to discuss the offseason storylines and the upcoming season surrounding the North Carolina Tar Heels.
Good, man. How are you? I'm so sorry about earlier today. I completely flaked on that.
No, it's all good. I totally understand, man. You always got something to do when it comes to covering the ACC. So, but hey, thanks for just sitting down with us and talking a little bit of Tar Heel football. I know, you cover all the ACC, so really focusing on one team might be a little tough for you, but hopefully, you can make it through, man.
I will try not to embarrass myself too badly.
So, well, first I got to ask you, I know last year you went through and you picked out a new profile picture for Twitter. Are you going to do the same thing again this year, or are you just sticking with the picture that you got on there now? Because I thought that was just awesome last year.
Yeah, no, I'll switch it up every year. This one's been around since I tried to do it around March Madness. I put a little tournament together this year to get this one. I'll switch it up again at some point next year. The important part is never to show my ugly face with the Twitter handle. So hopefully I maintain a level of professional distance by doing this.
Amazing that we have the same policy. That's my exact policy as well. So, I wanted to start. It's pretty much still the biggest thing that is going to come out of this offseason, I think, really for the national media when it surrounds the Tar Heels. And that's Larry Fedora's comments that we heard at ACC Media Day. Just start by telling me, what did you think of his comments? And, now that you've had a little bit of time to kind of, get away from all the immediate reaction, has your opinion changed any from what it was that day?
No, I mean, I'm pretty much, I think I had a pretty good understanding of where it was that Larry was trying to go with things that day. Now, the problem that he had is, I think, not necessarily in the substance of what he said. It was in all of the other frills that he added to that substance, suggesting that there was the downfall of our country if football became too soft. And, just the way that he sort of denied stuff that is essentially facts and evidence already, I think is problematic. I mean, he tended to undercut his own point, and I think it was a reasonable point, by showing a lot of ignorance and disinformation in the overall sense of what he was saying. But if you really get down into the nitty gritty, his point, which is that football, I think, has taken more of a beating for the CTE stuff than any other sport, despite the fact that other sports may have, or any other activities in life may have, some direct correlations, or perhaps more direct correlations than football does to it. But football is sort of becoming the scapegoat. He's not wrong about that. And he's not wrong about the fact that there's still a lot we don't know or understand about CTE. I mean, there's people who get it who have had no concussions. There's people who have tons of concussions and don't ever have any symptoms of it. And I think in some respects that we have, as a society, sort of allowed CTE to become this sort of catch-all for a bunch of different problems. And that's not in any way to undermine the severity or seriousness of CTE and the relationship that it has to football, but just that the issue is significantly more complex than it is largely portrayed. And I think that's what Larry was getting at. And certainly if you are somebody who makes your living in football, you look at some of the stories that are out there, you look at the participation rates in youth football, and you're concerned and you want to defend your sport. And I understand where he's coming from with that. I think he would have raised some interesting points for discussion, but what instead happened is that the eccentricities of how he said it became the focus of what was said, rather than what I think are some very legitimate concerns or questions, or at least points about the complexity of the issue and how simplified it's being portrayed in the media.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I've met Larry plenty of times before, and I've talked to him, and the notion really that some of these national media guys had that, look, he's a horrible person, and he's really just worried about winning football games. That is definitely not true. He's worked so well with some of those guys on campus that are trying to research CTE. So I'm with you. I think it was really just in the phrasing. I don't know. And it's kind of weird because, it's like someone I saw on Twitter said, this is not his first time being around the media. So it kind of didn't make sense, I don't think, to any of us. So, I don't know.
I had a conversation with another coach the following day, one of the Atlantic Division coaches who was there. Of course, they're all talking about that too because they don't want to put their foot in their mouth at all. And but they all said, look, my experience with Larry is that he's very thoughtful and considered, and when we're in meetings and Larry Fedora speaks up, all of us are paying attention because generally he is very insightful about what he says, and again, I think he was being insightful in a lot of respects, but it's sort of like if you don't present a complex issue in a nuanced way, he sort of undermined his point by doing the same thing that he's criticizing others for doing. He took something complex and tried to make it sort of a soundbite, and that soundbite came back to bite him as it turns out.
So let's turn the focus onto the field, but we're going to stick with Larry Fedora. Right now, coming into this season, he comes off a 3-9 year. I don't think that the comments really helped him all that much, especially with the fact that Bubba Cunningham was a little kind of shied away from it right after it happened. How hot is Larry's seat going into this season, and should he be worried that if he doesn't at least make a bowl game this year, he might not be in Chapel Hill at the start of next season?
Yeah, there's, I think, some legitimate concerns there, and if you're looking at ACC coaches, I would probably point to him as the hottest seat for a number of reasons. Number one, he's obviously coming off the worst season, and there's no question that 3-9 is an unacceptable result there. However, he has a lot of explanations for why that was. I mean, that was an injury-riddled year. But the thing is that you talk to people around the sport, and I don't think anybody looks at that team and says, look, even if they were healthy last year, that was maybe a 6-6 team. As much as the injuries were a problem and as bad as things got, I actually kind of came away thinking, well, the injuries to some extent maybe covered up some of the flaws, and some of those guys who got to play because of the injuries might help this team more this year because they got playing time. There was, when Elijah Hood and Mitch Trubisky departed, I think that kind of took them a little bit by surprise and left them a little bit flat-footed in recruiting and personnel and on the depth chart. There was just going to be problems last year. That's the long and short of it. And there's bigger issues now in terms of the comments. How much of the comments actually impact what Bubba thinks of him? I don't know that it's that much, but you'd be foolish to think that other programs aren't going to use that against him in terms of recruiting. So if you're sitting in mama and daddy's house and saying, I want your kid to come play for me, there's going to be coaches who are going to say, don't go to UNC where this guy doesn't even believe that football can cause CTE. We're going to protect your kid. That's going to be used against them. And recruiting, as everybody at UNC knows, has already been an issue for so long because of the effectively never-ending NCAA cloud that was hanging over them. So, I think that more than the win-loss record, it's more sort of the context of the win-loss record this year. Does the team show market improvement? Are they competitive in every game? Is the recruiting getting better? Is it getting worse? What is sort of the mindset among the fan base about Larry Fedora? Are there people in the stands, which is always a concern there? So, there's a lot that goes into it. But every time you talk about coaches on the hot seat, and I know not every AD follows this. They certainly should, but not all of them do. But I always ask myself, all right, if you think that this guy isn't good enough, who are you getting that's better? And then, you got to go back a little ways at North Carolina to find anybody who has had more success there than Larry Fedora has. So, I think a bowl game would probably be would assure his safety there, but to me, I would not be super eager to move on unless you've got a really good idea of what Plan B is.
You bring up that interesting point that I think a lot of people don't realize when it comes to his comments, and that's how his comments are going to be used with the recruiting. I totally agree with that, and that's something that people have to say, look, right now the recruiting is not good to begin with this season. This cycle has been a complete disaster. Just the other day, we lost one of our top commits in the class in Emory Simmons. I mean, there's only 11 guys committed to this class, only 4 in-state guys. It's just not good for him, and that I think you're right. That could end up hurting them down the line as well. It's really going to come down to, like you said, results on the field. That'll bring the recruiting. That will at least put these comments to the back burner for a while. So, that's I agree with you. That's kind of what he's got to do. The big storyline, I think, on the field for this year, I mean, you talked about all the experience that we gained from last year, but now we're kind of in this weird spot because we have these looming suspensions that are potentially coming up. I think a lot of people are really worried about this. Do you know anything on the front of these suspensions, or is it still a mystery as of this moment?
I don't have anything specific that I could report on it at the moment, other than the bulk of what I've heard is that things are probably less severe maybe than they originally were portrayed, or at least that the way the NCAA works, it's hard to pin down things, but this did not. The bulk of what I've heard does not lead me to believe we're looking at like long-term suspensions for a lot of guys. So let's say you chalked up week 1 at Cal as a loss anyway. It may be that there's not a whole lot of long-term repercussions from this, but it does, to your point earlier, I think the problem is how do you start getting some good headlines at North Carolina instead of just the bad ones, because the bad ones are really overshadowing everything. And, as we talk about, is Larry Fedora on the hot seat? Well, certainly this doesn't help. And every time you have even a hot seat conversation, that hurts in recruiting. So that's another issue. And then the fact that the recruiting schedule has really been moved up. I mean, with the early signing day last year, 80 to 85% of players were signed at the early signing period. So that window of opportunity to change the conversation is smaller and smaller. And so, again, it's just at North Carolina, you are pretty much dying for good headlines at this point. And that's been sort of unfortunately for the Tar Heels and for Larry Fedora, has been sort of an ongoing thing for a long time because of the way the NCAA has gone. But it certainly does feel like after a 3-9 season, things have still managed to get worse this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like a nightmare that we've been going through really since the start of last year. I mean, every time we see it, it's like, are you kidding me? Like, can we get anything that'll make us happy? One of the things that may have made us happy, and maybe a good thing going throughout this season, Antonio Williams is declared eligible for this season. Of course, the transfer running back from Ohio State. How big of an impact do you really think he's going to be able to have for this Tar Heel football team?
Well, I think number one, it gives you just a guy with some veteran experience and some veteran, voice in the locker room. I mean, it's hard to, you talk to coaches all the time, and they'll tell you it's very hard when your team is coach driven. From a leadership perspective, you want your team to be player driven. And last year, it was just hard to be player driven because those guys who would have been sort of the veteran leaders were guys who got hurt early or really didn't play particularly well. And so the offense in particular fell to a lot of young guys. And, who are all of those guys? Is Antonio Ratliff-Williams, is Michael Carter, are these guys ready to say, hey, I'm going to be a voice in the locker room? I think that's a hard thing to ask of those guys. So I think that's one of the areas where it makes a difference. On the field, I think people kind of underestimated that as the year went on, the running game actually played pretty well. If you add up the numbers between Carter and Jordan Brown, you're looking at close to 1,200 yards rushing and what about 12 touchdowns, I think. So I mean that was not a terrible running game considering how much the offense struggled at times overall, and how much none of those guys could have been really prepared for the role that they got thrust into. So I think the ground game, particularly for UNC, now that you add Antonio Williams, becomes a potentially really big asset for them. I think that's one of the better running games in the ACC, even though they haven't necessarily gotten much attention right now.
Yeah, oh, well, there you go. Yeah, you answered my next question. I saw that you had the ratings up back in mid-July on the position units. And, I was wondering, do you think this moves this running back group into a top 5 group, at least in the ACC?
Yeah, and I mean, there's some really good units out there. I mean, it's hard to say that they're ahead of Florida State or Clemson or certainly A.J. Dillon at Boston College. But I think they're in the mix now where it's certainly not a negative. And I think that, are they I think that that if you say, would you rather have a really established run game or an established passing game, you go with the running game every time, because I think that helps you open up a lot more down the field when you can run the ball effectively. So, I don't know, are they top five? Maybe not, but they're certainly in that 5, 6, 7 range probably. I think they're average to above average in the ACC, but that's probably saying more than it sounds like, because I think there's a lot of really good run games in the ACC.
Yeah, it's definitely a big get, having him in the lineup, because we're still going through a quarterback battle. Chaz Surratt, Nathan Elliott keep battling back and forth. Apparently, what I'm hearing is one of the rumors said that it could be Surratt that could be involved with the suspensions. Now, that's nothing that can be confirmed at all. I want to make that perfectly clear to anybody listening to this. But going into this quarterback battle right now, if everything is, perfectly fine with both of their eligibilities, which one of these guys do you feel will end up emerging?
Yeah, this is probably one of the more intriguing quarterback battles. I mean, it's not getting the attention because North Carolina is coming off a 3-win season. But if you start kind of looking at where there's quarterback battles around the country, this one to me seems like probably about the most dead even between the two guys who are really at the top of the conversation, because both of them played a good bit last year.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to sort of compare what they did, because a lot of when Chaz was on the field was early in the season, and he had some more weapons around him, but Elliott played a little bit more at the end of the season, and maybe guys were a little bit more had found a little bit more of a groove. I hate to even kind of guess at this point, because I think it's very close. But as you said, as things kind of progress through fall camp, it doesn't take much to push one against the other, ahead of the other. And I had this conversation with Dave Clawson at Wake Forest, because he's got a quarterback who they expected to be the starter, who's going to be suspended the first 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, how many, if you obviously thought he was going to be your starter, how many first team reps is he going to get this fall? And Clawson said, none. I'm not giving him any reps. We don't have time to waste on a guy who can't play. And that's how much a quote unquote quarterback competition can change quickly because of some off the field stuff. So, to me, there's a whole lot up in the air right now at the quarterback battle. I will say this, though. I think both of them showed enough flashes last year that whoever ends up winning the job is has a chance to be very successful, but B, can't exactly sit there and say that they're comfortable in the job, because if Elliott ends up starting week 1 and plays really well, I could see him running away with it. But there's not going to be a point where you're not saying, oh, he's got a pretty good guy right behind him. I think that this is close enough that I'm not sure that even week 1 necessarily gives us a firm answer on who the QB is long term.
Gosh, another bad headline. Good gosh, we cannot. Oh, I hope not, man. Last thing that and we'll get you out of here. I saw your preseason all the ACC team that you did end up sending in. There were no Tar Heels on there. I don't take an issue with that, because this is such a talented group that we have here in the ACC of players that probably are going to be very successful at the next level. The question for me is are there any guys that you really are keeping an eye on that could end up being on that first team all ACC at the end of the year? I have 2 guys in mind, but I want to see if you will mention them before I tell you.
Well, I think certainly Anthony Ratliff-Williams belongs in that conversation. If you're not looking at him as a receiver, then certainly as one of those all-purpose guys, the return guys. I mean, he's a legitimate game breaker there. So, you give him a more consistent quarterback situation and a more consistent offense, and it's very easy to sort of see how he could blossom into a guy that we're having that conversation with as maybe one of those top 3 receivers in the league. The other guy that I think, in any other year would probably be high up in that conversation of all ACC team is Malik Carney. The problem is the defensive ends in this league are pretty well stacked. Clemson's got a whole bunch of them, but certainly when you start looking at guys like Zach Allen at Boston College, who's a potential first-round draft pick, or you start looking at Brian Burns at Florida State.
Yes.
The guy, Miami's got a couple of good ones too. So it's a very crowded field, but I think that Malik is certainly really good. And I would argue that defensive line, you talked about the running game a little bit earlier as being a potential strength. Defensive line, I think, has a chance to be a real strength for North Carolina too. They're pretty good across the board there.
Yeah, the one that I had that I think a lot of people have to keep an eye on is Aaron Crawford at defensive tackle. I love his ability, really in the trenches to get in there and affect the run game, something that we really haven't had in a while at Carolina. So, I think he's also a very solid pass rusher. I think he could have some sneaky good numbers, and I'm thinking that if he really steps up and shows, as he did in spring practice, that, hey, I can take over that role on that defensive line. Last year we had that rotation going throughout the year. I think he might end up becoming more of a solid guy on the field, where we see him play, a lot more snaps than we saw most of the defensive tackles play a year ago. So, hey, David, thanks for doing this, man. This was sensational. You do such a great job covering the ACC for ESPN, and I know that you love getting involved with all of the fans of these teams out there, and I think we all secretly appreciate it. Some people might get frustrated because they don't like hearing the facts. But, it's any time that you're on there, I always love to check on the Twitter account and see what you got going on, man.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and I am more than happy to keep people informed or enraged, whichever avenue they have chosen to take. But I certainly enjoy it, and I appreciate you having me on.
All right, man. Thank you very much. You have a great college football season, and we'll hope to talk to you sometime down the line. All right, man?
All right, sounds good. Right back at you.
All right, man. All right, so great stuff there from David Hale over at ESPN talking about the Tar Heels, some of the storylines, of course, off the field this offseason, and what he expects from this team this coming season. Guys, believe it or not, it's not that far off, and we're going to be getting, more and more episodes going on, hoping to get the idea that I had a couple of weeks ago to try to get your predictions on the season going here soon. There is still a month left, but I know we're getting into fall practice, fall camp, so we are going to be broadcasting some more episodes here. I'm hoping that Zach Hubbard will be the guy that will be on with me, maybe some of Josh Marlowe, who also has been on as a host. So we're definitely going to try to start hitting this hard. And by the time we get into the season, we will be having a weekly show to talk about everything that is going on in the world of Tar Heel football. Guys, as always, the Heel Tough blog is up and running at full power at the moment. We just had all of our position previews for the entire team. That mentions every single player that will be on the roster this year, just in case they end up having an impact. So learn about these guys. Learn what the depth chart might be, at least from my perspective. I am no expert, let me just say that. But, these guys are going to be playing for us this year. Why not learn a little bit about them and read about what you could be possibly seeing from these guys this upcoming season? Some other big stuff going on up on the blog here in the next few days. And, of course, the big event that is coming up for Tar Heel fans is this weekend, this Saturday. Head up to Chapel Hill. It will be in the Blue Zone this year. That's right, guys. Meet the Heels is going back in the stadium. Guys, come out and check it out. Support this team. Come out and give these guys the support they deserve. These guys haven't had the support really since I've been going to any games here. As a kid, this team deserves it. Show up, give these guys the support they deserve, and come out and just enjoy it. Talk to these guys, find out what they're all about, and get some signatures. So, as always, as I said, check out the blog. That's Heel Tough Blog on Medium.com. Check out the podcast. We got it on Spreaker. That's where that's where we broadcast it from. That is where it will originally be posted. But we've got it on iTunes. We've got it on Google Play. We've got it on the TuneIn app. So many places that you can listen to it, guys. So keep yourself up to date on what's going on in the world of Tar Heel football. As always, follow me on Twitter at Future Tar Heel. That's where you'll see all the updates. Also on Facebook, Anthony Pagnotta. Just search my name, and you will find all you need on that site for Carolina football. So, guys, I'm signing off for today. David Hale, thanks again for stopping by. Check out his stuff on ESPN. Great guy that covers the ACC. They do such a great job over there at ESPN covering the ACC. And next year, remember, he will be a big part of the ACC network. So, guys, as I sign off, remember, always go Tar Heels.